It was a quiet Thursday morning, then the headlines hit like thunder. President Joe Biden diagnosed with prostate cancer. TVs across the globe cut into regular programming. Phones buzzed nonstop. Social media exploded. Everyone was posting messages of support, but in Burkina Faso, deep in the presidential office, Captain Ibrahim Traore paused silently as he read the news. He didn't reach for his phone. He didn't call his advisors. He just stood still, his eyes fixed. On the screen, the soft hum of the air conditioning was the only sound. The world was reacting politely, carefully, predictably, but Traore felt something different, something deeper. He knew what the world expected: a formal statement, the usual diplomatic words, maybe a tweet with flags and prayer hands. But his heart was stirring because he wasn't just thinking about Biden, he was thinking about something bigger, something the world had been ignoring for years, something he had buried inside him for too long. And now this diagnosis had opened a door he had kept shut, but no one, not even his closest aides, could predict what Traore was about to say on live international TV. Just a few days later, the White House moved fast. They arranged a global summit on unity and health, a grand televised event meant to show support for President Biden while encouraging world leaders to unite on cancer research. The world's most powerful figures were invited: France, Germany, Canada, South Africa, China, Brazil, and yes, Burkina Faso. At first, nobody thought Captain Ibrahim Traore would attend. He was known for staying close to his people, rarely traveling abroad and speaking only when it mattered. But 3 days later, to everyone's surprise, Traore boarded a plane, and when he landed in Geneva, the media went wild. Traore joins Biden Health Summit. Why now? The silent warrior speaks. He didn't answer questions, he didn't wave to cameras, but there was a calm, heavy look in his eyes, like a man carrying something bigger than words. That night, he sat silently in the summit's back row. Dozens of cameras scanned the room, zooming in on world leaders. Still, no one expected anything out of the ordinary until the moderator said, "And now we invite Captain Ibrahim Traore of Burkina Faso to say a few words." He stood slowly, took a breath, and stepped forward. The room fell silent. You could hear the click of camera shutters, the distant hum of audio equipment, even the subtle shifting of seats. Captain Ibrahim Traore approached the glass podium slowly. Calmly, he didn't open a folder. He didn't read a speech. Instead, he looked out across the room, then straight into the main camera. "I wasn't going to speak today." That was his first sentence, simple, unexpected, raw. "I came here out of respect for President Biden, for the pain he's going through, for the fear his family must be feeling." People leaned in, blinked hard. No one moved. "But I didn't come to say the usual things," he continued. "I won't talk like a politician today, because this news, it reminded me of something I've buried for years." He paused, looked down, and when he looked up again, his eyes were red. "My father died of prostate cancer. But he didn't have doctors, he didn't have medicine. He died in a tent, in the rain, with no one watching." Muffled gasps echoed across the room. The camera panned across stunned faces, and Captain Traore kept going. Captain Traore's voice broke as he spoke again. "My father was strong, a farmer, a fighter. He worked with his hands, fed 10 people from nothing. But when the sickness came, he had no chance." The room stayed frozen, not even a cough. He begged for help. "We knocked on clinic doors, but they said, 'We have no doctors for that, no tests, no machines.' So we waited." He paused, his jaw clenched, and one morning he couldn't speak anymore. "I watched my father, my hero, fade away in silence." A tear slipped down his cheek. The camera caught it. "I tell you this, not for pity, but because in Africa, millions of fathers are still dying like this, silently, invisibly." A ripple moved through the audience, and when I heard that President Biden was diagnosed, I felt sadness, but I also felt something else. He looked up, his eyes steady. I felt anger. Whispers spread in the crowd. "I am angry not at Biden, but at a world where a sick man's survival depends on the flag on his passport." That sentence landed like thunder. The hall went quiet again. He wasn't done. Traore took a deep breath. "I grew up in a house with a leaking roof when it rained. My mother used to place bowls under the drops, but we still smiled, we still lived." He scanned the silent hall slowly. "But when my father got sick, there were no bowls big enough to catch the pain." He looked directly at President Biden, who sat quietly watching. "You will survive this, Mr. President. You have doctors, hospitals, helicopters, security. You'll make speeches again. You'll hug your grandchildren again." The audience nodded. "But what about my people?" Traore asked, his voice rising. "What about the man in Ouagadougou, who sells oranges in the sun and feels a pain he can't explain? Who will check him? Who will save him?" Now the emotion was visible on faces across the room, eyes reading, some hands trembling. "Why do our fathers have to die quietly? Why do our mothers have to clean their blood with cloth and pretend it's just a fever? He stepped back slightly, letting the weight of his words settle. I didn't come here to blame, he said softly. I came here to beg. The world to see us, truly see us. Silence longer than expected. Even the translators paused. Ibrahim Traore stood tall, chest rising slowly with breath behind him. The flags of the world seemed suddenly distant, irrelevant. I am not asking for pity, he said gently. We have strength in Africa. We build, we rise, we fight, but we cannot fight cancer with empty hands. Then he looked straight into the camera. Let me ask the world one question. He raised a single finger. What if Joe Biden was born in Burkina Faso? The room froze. Every leader, every diplomat, every journalist, silent. What if he woke up and had no insurance, no access, no voice to say, I'm in pain? Would he be here today? A cameraman accidentally dropped a lens cap. It echoed loudly in the stillness. President Biden's pain is real, Traore said, but so is ours, our fathers, our brothers, our children. He slowly stepped away from the podium. No one clapped, no one moved, not because it wasn't powerful, but because it was too powerful, the kind of truth that burns, the kind of truth that can't be followed with applause. And in that moment, the world changed a little. Traore returned to his seat, but no one dared speak, no one even shifted for a few seconds. It felt like the whole world was holding its breath. Then slowly, quietly, a single clap echoed, one, then two, then silence again. No standing ovation, no political applause, just stunned silence. Later that night, journalists gathered near the lobby of the Geneva Hotel. Some wanted a quick quote, others wanted to criticize him for speaking too raw, too honest. But when a reporter caught up to him and asked, aren't you afraid this could affect your relationship with the West? Traore stopped walking. He looked directly into the camera and said quietly, I know this may cost me, but I didn't come here to make friends. I came here to tell the truth. Then he walked away. That moment went viral. Millions on TikTok, Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook shared the clip. Some wept, some debated, but most just watched it on repeat, unsure why they were crying. It wasn't just a speech, it was a wound, finally being spoken aloud, and the whole world felt it. The next morning, Traore's press office received an email. No subject line, no fancy signature. Just two sentences. I heard your words. I saw your tears. I want to help JD. At first, no one knew what to make of it, but a few hours later confirmation came from the White House. The email had been sent by President Joe Biden himself, and suddenly the mood shifted. CNN ran a breaking banner. Biden privately responds to Ibrahim Traore's speech. BBC added, unexpected alliance forming. Inside Burkina Faso, people gathered in cafes, in markets, in homes replaying Traore's speech over and over again. Mothers cried, fathers nodded in silent pain. Some said for the first time, someone spoke for us. But what no one expected was what happened that very afternoon. The U.S. Secretary of State requested a private video call with Traore, not to lecture him, but to listen. And as that video call began, Ibrahim Traore sat alone at his desk. No media, no lights, just one hand on his heart. He had no script, but he had something even stronger: memory. The camera turned on the Secretary of State, smiled politely. Captain Traore, thank you for joining us. The President asked me to convey his deep respect for your words. Yesterday. Traore nodded, but didn't smile. He leaned forward. You speak of respect, he said calmly, but how can a man be respected only after he dies of a preventable disease? The room across the screen went quiet. I don't want words, I want action. He paused, then added, you don't understand pain until it sleeps in your home, until you hold your father's hand and feel it go cold because the nearest doctor is 400 meters away. The secretary looked shaken. I'm not angry at your wealth, Traore continued. I'm angry that, are suffering and still ignore it. Then he reached for something off camera. He held up a photo of a little boy. This was Joseph, 7 years old. He died in 2021. He had, what, President? Biden has but no treatment. His mother sold her wedding ring to buy medicine that never arrived, and then his voice broke. I buried him with my own hands. The secretary closed his eyes. Traore added quietly, now, tell me, what are you going to do? That night, back in Burkina Faso, an old woman knocked on the presidential residence gate. She wasn't on any list, no appointment, no ID. But the guard noticed something in her eyes, grief too heavy for words. Traore was already in bed when they Brought her in, she held out a small envelope. Inside was a picture of a boy. His lips were cracked. His body looked thin, too thin. She whispered his name was Yakuba. He was 9. He wrote a letter to you before he died. He thought maybe you'd care. Traore opened the letter. The handwriting was shaky. Dear Captain Traore, if I die before you read this, please don't be angry. I know I'm not important like big presidents, but I still hoped you'd know my name. My dream was to grow up and help people like you. By the end, the paper was soaked in Traore's tears. He didn't say a word, but the next morning he called a press conference and held up the letter. The room fell silent. This is who I speak for. Not your approval, not your comfort, but this child. As the press conference went viral, people around the world began opening their hearts. Thousands of letters flooded Ouagadougou. Some were from Burkina children, others came from Americans, Europeans, even nurses in Australia. But one envelope stood out. It had the White House seal. It was handwritten by First Lady Jill Biden. Her words were soft, but they hit deep. Captain Traore, I watched your speech and I cried. I cried not just for Joe, but for every mother who lost a son too early, every father who felt helpless watching his child suffer. You reminded us of what's often forgotten in politics, human pain. May we find courage in your honesty. Jill, that letter, when released publicly, stunned the world. Commentators on CNN said this is more than diplomacy. Now this is history being written. But what broke millions was when a boy from a rural Burkina Faso village held up a handmade sign on live TV that read, "If President Biden gets help, can my uncle get help too?" That night, hashtags exploded. Heal the forgotten. Yakuba's voice was right. Another summit was called, this time behind closed doors. France, the UK, the US, Canada, African Union. They didn't invite cameras, but one aide leaked audio, and the world heard something raw. Traore's voice, steady, calm. We are not asking for charity, we are asking for fairness. Then silence, then the faint shuffle of papers. He continued, when your children fall ill, you fly them to the best hospitals. When ours fall ill, we bury them in the backyard. You say, we need to earn your support. But what do the dead need to earn care? Then came a line that would be replayed everywhere. Africa is not poor, it is robbed. Its children are not voiceless, they are ignored. You could hear someone in the room sobbing. Another voice, trembling, asked, what do you want us to do? And Traore answered, start by listening, then start saving lives the same way you save your own. Outside news broke. The US and several European countries agreed to fund emergency rural clinics across West Africa. But for Traore, that wasn't the victory. He whispered to his advisor later that night, I just wish Yakuba was still here to see this. In the middle of a quiet morning in Ouagadougou, a small dusty envelope landed on Captain Traore's desk. No sender's name. Inside, just one photo and a torn hospital report. The photo showed a nurse in a crumbling clinic. Her eyes looked tired, but she was smiling beside 3 children. Hooked 2 IVs made from empty Coca-Cola bottles. A handwritten note read, we do what we can, but sometimes we just pray instead. They don't need miracles, they just need someone to remember them. Nurse, Ouagadougou, Burkina Faso. That evening, during a televised meeting with world leaders, Traore didn't use slides or graphs. He held up the photo, then he said slowly, while President Biden receives world-class cancer care, my people fight to survive. With soda bottles and borrowed hope, don't ask me to stay silent. The room went dead silent. CNN's Jake Tapper paused mid-sentence during the live stream. On social media, people began changing their profile pictures to nurse. Awa's face, this wasn't just a political moment anymore, it was becoming a global heartbreak. And for many, the guilt started to sink in. 2 days later, during a public appearance in Fengorma, a little girl approached Traore's convoy barefoot. She wasn't shouting, she wasn't crying, she just held a white scarf in her tiny hand. Security moved to stop her, but Traore told them to let her through. The girl looked up and whispered, my brother died waiting for medicine. Can you wear this scarf on TV so the world doesn't forget him? Traore bent down and tied the scarf to his wrist. What's your name? He asked. Zanab. She replied. That same day, Traore walked into a UN conference with the scarf still tied to his wrist. He didn't need to say a word. The cameras zoomed in the moment. When viral scarf for Zanab started trending globally, people all over the world began wearing white scarves in solidarity with forgotten children across Africa. Even celebrities and politicians joined in, but behind the screen in Zanab's village, her mother still hadn't eaten in 2 days. She watched the news silently and whispered, maybe, now they'll see us. For the first time in her life, she felt heard late one night. Traore's advisor rushed into his study. His hands were shaking. "You need to take this," he said, handing over the satellite phone. "It's the White House." Traore paused on the other end. A calm but tired voice spoke. "Captain, this is President Biden." There was a long silence. "I've watched everything." Biden continued. "Your speech, the scarf, the boy's letter. I'm sorry we failed you. The world did." Traore didn't interrupt. He waited then. Biden said something unexpected. "Let's change this. Not just a donation, not just a photo op. I want something real, something permanent." The call lasted 7 minutes by morning news outlets. Around the globe reported the unexpected breakthrough the U.S. committed to building a joint international medical initiative, named Project Yakuba, to bring proper healthcare to forgotten African regions, starting with Burkina Faso. People cried in their living rooms on YouTube. Reaction videos poured in. One American teenager posted, "I came to mock a political speech, and I ended up sobbing for a kid I never knew," and that was the moment viewers knew. This story wasn't just about cancer or politics, it was about finally being seen. 3 days after their call, Captain Traore was quietly flown to Washington, D.C., under heavy security, but this wasn't for a press event. He was escorted to a private room inside the National Institutes of Health. Inside were 4 doctors, 2 senators, and a boy named Malik. Malik was 9 years old, Burkina Faso American. His father had fled. During a violent crisis years ago now, Malik was battling leukemia alone in a foreign hospital. "Mr. Traore," Malik whispered, "do you think my dad's watching me from heaven?" Traore knelt beside him. He didn't promise miracles. He simply held Malik's hand and said, "Even if the world forgets us, I won't, and I promise I'll make them remember." Malik smiled weakly and fell asleep that night. Traore told a group of U.S. policymakers, "Malik is not a project, he's not a symbol, he's a child. Let's stop saving face and start saving lives." His voice cracked. One congresswoman wiped her tears. Another removed her microphone and left the room overwhelmed the next morning. CNN's top headline read, "Burkina Faso's captain just taught the world what leadership looks like." Back in Burkina Faso, the country was holding its breath. Ibrahim Traore had agreed to a rare, live global interview with BBC in a laser simulcast to over 100 countries. The host asked him, "Captain, why did you risk your political career by calling out world leaders live?" He didn't flinch. "I wasn't risking my career, I was saving my conscience." The crowd went quiet. Then he added, "President Biden has cancer, and I pray for his healing. But what do we say to the children who die because their suffering isn't trending? If your empathy needs a spotlight, it isn't real." The internet froze. Clips of that answer were translated into 40+ languages. Millions of comments poured in. "This man just tore my heart open. I didn't know who." Ibrahim Traore was yesterday. Today, I can't stop crying. He didn't just speak, he bled truth. Even a retired U.S. veteran commented, "I served 3 wars. I've never seen a leader fight like this." And from his small bed in Washington, Malik smiled as he watched Traore on screen. His hero not in a suit, but in truth. Weeks passed, the headlines faded, but in the dry village of Dori, an old man named Baba wrote a letter. He had no phone, no TV, just a radio and a pen that barely worked. His grandson had died at the age of 5 of dehydration. Baba's letter was short. "I am 84. I cannot offer money. I cannot offer votes, but I can tell you this. My grandson died with his eyes open. Waiting you, Captain, made sure he wasn't waiting alone." The letter reached Traore through a village runner. He read it silently, and then, during a final public speech at the Africa Summit, he pulled the crumpled letter from his jacket and read it aloud, his voice breaking mid-sentence. By the end, even the translators couldn't speak. A moment of silence fell deeper than applause, and when the cameras panned across the room, world leaders, aid workers, and generals alike were quietly wiping their eyes on the last day of the summit. Something unexpected happened. Hundreds of leaders walked in, not in suits but wearing white scarves just like Zeneb's Traore. Stood at the podium. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't read a speech. He just held up a small photo of Malik, a child who'd made the world stop for a moment. Then he said, "This scarf is not just for Zub. It's for every forgotten soul from Ouagadougou to Gaza, from Flint to Sudan. If we don't learn to weep for each other, then what are we even doing here?" The room rose to its feet. Some clapped. Others simply cried. And across the world, people did the same, not because of politics, but because of one man who chose to speak from the heart when